Today we have a LS Swap 240SX with Holley Terminator X. So we're going to go through the tuning process on the dyno. This car did come in running using the Wizard and the handheld, but we're going to go through with the laptop and fine tune everything. It seems to idle a little bit rough, so we're going to start there. Then we will do the steady state fuel tuning on the dyno, and then we'll move into the full throttle stuff. Alright, let's get started. Alright, first thing I did was downloaded the file that was in it that ran enough to get it here. But if we look at the learn table, I can see this thing is pulling out damn near 50% fuel in the idle area. And then if we go to the base fuel, you can see if we subtract that basically 50%, we're going to be down in the like 10% volumetric efficiency. So just right off the get-go, we're going to make the assumption that something's wrong somewhere, whether that's in the fuel pressure or in the fuel injector setup or maybe even the map sensor setup. So I'll dig through, figure out what's going on with that. Can't really do much with the idle until we figure out what's up with the fuel. So let's start there. Alright, verified our map sensor is reading correctly and verified the fuel injectors. I actually couldn't read the part number, so I took a picture and like zoomed in on it with my phone, and we are good on that. So the only thing I'm currently seeing that's wrong is the actual system pressure. So we'll fire it up, get it running, tinker with that a little bit, and see where we're at. I'll run through and make a few little changes here. I'll come back to that in a minute. Alright, so before we start messing with any of that, let's just get our kind of base fueling close. I don't know if I need a clutch to start this or not. Starts a little rowdy. Need to rescale this table as well. Alright, something's still not right. Let's go honey. Scale that. Computer's going super slow. computer's going too slow. I'm going to restart it real quick. It's letting me know why it's being an asshole conveniently. So, restart it. Since this thing's out of control when it starts up, let's just get everything out of our way. Keep in mind all these values are here just for testing purposes. So once we get the crazy flare out of the way, then we can go back and set this stuff back up. So this one apparently is going to want to be really sensitive. I think I'm going to turn the idle down on the throttle body a little bit. Now the fun part about this is it seems that you got to do this 45 times because you overshoot and undershoot and overshoot and undershoot. We'll just call that one full turn. Now we need to do TPS auto set. See if that makes this any better. I think. See if it'll hold an idle at all with basically no idle control enabled. Tell by now I'm just kind of doing like some roughing everything in to figure out ballparks of where we're going to be, and then we'll go back and clean it all up. I tend to use KPA on the naturally aspirated stuff and then boost pressure on the turbo stuff, which is just here under preferences. pretty good so far. You could argue that the IAC position should have a little bit of a value in here, which we are still overshooting the target just a little bit, so I'm probably going to go another quarter of a turn on the throttle body and then redo the TPS calibration. No need to watch me do that again, so I'm going to stop recording for a second. Something else to look out for when you're doing this is, even though I backed the screw out, the actual throttle cable is maxed out. So we're going to have to adjust the cable itself too, because the cable is preventing it from closing any further. Alright, so now it barely wants to start, if at all, which should be a good thing. It just doesn't want to idle any lower. Let me bump it down on the throttle body just a little bit. Alright, yeah, we're like 1 or 2%. So we're right at the point where the idle control valve is working. I don't want to go any lower on the throttle body. I know a lot of people have a theory on running the IC like 10% or whatever at idle. As long as it's not pegged, I'm okay with it, especially in a situation like this where you're kind of making some judgment calls. I'm going to go ahead and put all the startup airflow back in it for the idle, and then we'll probably be ready to start driving it a little bit. Alright, with our IAC parked values back in place, let's see if it starts all apeshit again. I've never had one that would want it to be this sensitive with starting up. There we go. So here's an interesting one. I had RPM above idle to start ramp at 1200, and watch what happens. My foot's off the throttle, just idling at 2000. So I set this to like 2000 RPM. You can see it comes back down. So that means we have our IAC hold position too high. Fix. So basically what it was doing is holding it at a fixed idle control value, and it never allowed it to come down low enough to where it would kind of start ramping back down. Got the dyno set up. It's saying that this thing has a really goofy gear ratio in it, so we might have to go back and revisit that. But I think at this point we're about ready to start making some runs. I guess actually I should go through here and kind of fix some of this stuff up. Just gonna make some kind of quick adjustments here. It's kind of temporary for the idle spark. I'll come back and revisit this. Well, usually I do some custom tables for this stuff, but trying to keep this sort of simple for this video, and gotta try and not make the video 4 hours long. Alright, I think that'll get us running. So now I have closed loop set relatively low and the learn turned off. And let's see, probably 2,000-ish RPM or so, we'll start making some fueling changes. Now we'll keep doing this. I'll probably take it up to 3,000, 3,500 and then see how it wants to. Some cars will go flat, some cars will start rolling over, but we'll see what it does. All right, now we have a pretty good baseline on the table of all the areas that we're gonna really drive in. Once we get up here into the higher manifold pressures, we'll do sweep tests to dial that in. So now I just gotta go through, smooth it out a little bit. And sometimes you have to do this a couple of times. Some cars are easier than others. This one's being a little finicky. So we'll do that, and then we'll get into some full throttle stuff. All right, timing's real soft. Fueling should be pretty conservative. And depending on how the run goes, I have no idea how high I'll rev it. I'll just make that decision as I'm in the middle of the run. Usually I could draw out a VE curve on this thing without having to really do any of this, but this one's not very normal. Graph looks awesome so far. Look at this log, you can see here throttle opens up, closed loop actually shuts off because we're got acceleration enrichment going on, which we might actually have a little bit too much going on. Got a little bit rich going down here, but once we got into the meat of the VE curve, pretty good. And then looks like above about 6,300 RPM we can start rolling it off a little bit. This would go 10 times faster if we could look at the table and the graph at the same time. All right, you get the point. You see down here it picked up a little bit of power by cleaning up the fueling. So I'll make another run without making any other changes other than just the fuel graph. Make sure our fueling's on point. I'm kind of thinking it's going to be really close after this run, and then we'll throw a little timing in it and see what that does. Alright, looks like we need just a little bit of fuel, kind of everywhere. 4,400 needs a little bit more than everywhere else. Picked up a little bit of power. $361. All right, I'm gonna put a degree of timing in it on this run and see what happens. Alright, our fueling is, I would say, consider that to be within 1%. Got one little spot here with 2-3% for just a second, but more than like a couple of percent, you'll just chase it forever, because it's just going to vary a little bit run to run. And that's kind of the point of the closed loop stuff, in my opinion, is to make up for those little differences, not relying on it to basically tune the car for you. So it made 367, and we'll look at the charts and compare them here in a second. Alright, and here's the power. So you can see I actually did put some timing in it down here in these lower RPMs. Didn't do anything, and looks like above 5,500 or so. You can see it started picking up a little bit. Perfectly happy with the fueling on that one. It's a decent amount of power again. Here's overlaying the last two runs, and again it just at higher RPM, even higher than last time. So picked up 5-6 horsepower. So I thought it was done on the last one, but had a little left in it. So it looks like our peak number stayed exactly the same, but gained a couple of horsepower in the mid-range. So that's just a true and honest horsepower number on this one. That's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys learned something. Kind of got to keep in mind when I'm doing these videos, I can't make the video 4 hours long, so we can't show every single tiny little aspect. This is how I make a living, so there's certain things that I do that I can't necessarily show in every video. So if you keep watching, you'll probably pick up on all the little stuff, but can't make it too easy for you. You got to work for it a little bit, right? So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.